Welcome to the week on mapping. This week, we're going to think about how we use geographical, environmental, political, and economic data to spatially represent the world we live in. And so, what I'd like you to do as we start this week is sit back and reflect on something. I want you to imagine where you were born or where you were raised. What do you imagine? What comes to mind? Maybe it's people. Maybe it's a local spot that is your favorite to go to. Maybe it's your favorite tree. Maybe it's your favorite corner. Think about what feelings that brings. Maybe some nostalgia, maybe some good feelings, maybe some bad feelings. And take a moment with that. I'm curious if any of you imagined a map. Maybe you did. I bet many of you, though, imagined concrete realities. So only take a step back now. So you think about the place you were born or raised. Now, try to think of that as a map. And let's imagine that we're raising up away from that map. And what's the next region? It could be another part if you're from a large city, another part of that city. It could be if you're from a small town, neighboring town. It could be if you're from a rural area, what is the local region of that, the local county, state, province, however it was organized. Try to go back till we get to the next big political body. If you're from a place that's organized by states or provinces, what's the next state? What's the next province? How do you think people in that area imagine where you're from? If they're very close, is it similar to your imagination of it? What's different? What feelings might be different? Go out further to the nation state level in your mind. How does that relate to what you imagined? How does that relate to what feelings you had, those maybe nostalgia feelings? And nostalgia can be good and bad. It actually means the pain of returning home. So that can be negative and positive feelings. How do those relate to each other? Now, this might seem obvious, like, no, I'm in this nation and it's composed of all these different groups that are together. But something we can think about in analyzing maps through a digital humanities lens is how is our imagination influenced by the narrative decisions of the people who make the map? So what I'd like to do next, now you've had that moment to reflect on your own past and your own experiences, because you're an expert on that region, because you grown in it. You have experiences that I wouldn't have of it. I want to tell you a story about something that sort of helped me reconceptualize my own upbringing, my own region. Let's take a look. Back in 2020, I had just moved from Atlanta, Georgia to South Dakota, but I'm originally from the Northwest region you see on your map. In particular, I'm from Oregon, that you see right here. And at that time, some devastating fires had just started going through the part of Oregon I'm from. And so I was on this page every day. This is the State of Oregon Fires and Hotspots Dashboard. It's from ArcGIS. You heard about GIS in your reading. It's a way to plot points on a map and visualize data for the people. So here we have the state of Oregon visualizing their hotspots data about where there are fires and where the fires are possibly spreading. I was going further on this every day, and it's really calmed down by now. But there were so many fires in this area right here. Now you see some purple in there right now. So this is kind of getting into maybe if I go back a little so you can see in context. So you have the Cascades, there's Mount Hood. If you're thinking, what's Oregon? I've only heard of Portland. That's Portland right there. So if you've seen Portlandia, that's what that is. But I'm from Marion County. That's this place right here. And I was zooming in all the time because there's this thing called the Beachy Creek Fire that was in this region. And so these state workers were mapping that data so that someone like me who was far away could see and check on their family, or someone who was there could see what was happening. And it was actually very red in here. And I was watching as the evacuation zones were spreading. Like here's Silver Falls State Park. That's the state park I went to a lot in my youth. And the narrative was it won't cross I-5. That's the interstate that links a lot of the West Coast. It will always stay east of I-5. Here's the thing. My parents' farm is east of I-5. So this is a way that I was interacting with my home region differently, seeing where kind of the part of Marion County I'm from, how it was being changed by fire. We get forest fires on the West Coast in general. We get them in Oregon, but this was more like Californian level fire that we aren't used to in Oregon. So there's competing narratives here. On one level, there's my own nostalgic narrative. I know this region very well. I could imagine, I've seen this map so many times, which I bet with your own local region, when you were imagining earlier in this talk, you had that too. There's also, though, things that maybe we can defamiliarize for ourselves, that this region is being organized by different political boundaries. There's Marion County. It's not being necessarily organized by the rivers, like Columbia River, Willamette River, Snake River on the other side. It's being organized by these political narratives that I grew up with. But it was being organized anew for me in that moment in 2020, because it's being organized by the path of fire. How was that fire progressing? It was almost like a new imaginary border by the limits of the fire, then further the political limits of when people were saying, who had the authority to announce evacuation, saying who needed to get out to be safe. And then there was boundaries of infrastructure that are maybe on my mind more if I'm trying to get somewhere. I think about I-5. If I'm trying to go somewhere, think about your local interstate. We were trying to go somewhere. That became a different boundary. That became a boundary of safety in my imagination, of those I knew on the west side of I-5 were safe. Those on the east side of I-5 maybe were not. I bring this up because you're looking at a tool used often by digital humanists, used often by state employees, people who are trying to crunch data, but it's showing ways that this tool can visualize things that we already imagine, but also shows other boundaries, because maybe we'll be imagining our local area by the boundaries, or maybe we'll think about the bioregion. This is called Cascadia. Or maybe the national region, or maybe a global context. But what happens if we reimagine that context by fire rather than the imagination? So there can be different ways that mapping can show us about what we're imagining and what we're living in. We also think about how this tool is really a narrative. This was a narrative of, here is the potential progression of a wildfire. And that opening reflection you had was partially examining in a beginning way, what's my narrative about my own past, about my own upbringing. So I'd like to leave you within this as we're thinking about this. These aren't necessarily things we're going to be able to answer this, but I want to kind of introduce you to those ideas as you start your own mapping project as a class community. To conclude this overview video, I would like to relate that opening reflection with the post-colonial thought of Gayatri Spivak. I'd like to give you a reflection she opens with from her book, Nationalism and the Imagination. And so that word post-colonial, you're thinking, well, what is that? So that's a line of theory that's dealing with the after effects, the cultural, aesthetic, and political after effects of European colonial rule, looking at what to do as colonial empires fade, fall apart, things like that, but also looking at how do we decolonize, how do we work against colonial structures that may still be in existence, how do we analyze colonial structures, see how possibly exploitation happens. So there's lots of things going on there. And here again is from Nationalism and the Imagination by Spivak. When and how does the love of mother tongue, the love of my little corner of ground, become the nation thing? I say nation thing rather than nationalism because something like nations, collectivities bound by birth, has been in existence long before nationalism came around. To return to my question, when and how does the love of mother tongue change like this? Pared down, this love or attachment is more like comfort. Remember, I brought up nostalgia before that. There's that could be comforting, it could be positive, but it literally means the pain of returning home. So spit back again. Pared down, this love or attachment is more like comfort. It is not really the declared love of country, full-blown nationalism. Let us revise. When and how does the comfort felt in one's mother tongue and the comfort felt in one's corner of the sidewalk, a patch of ground? And as a New Yorker, I will add a fire hydrant or a church door, transform itself into the nation thing. Something to consider as we're going through this unit of data storytelling in general, but also when we're going through this particular week on mapping. Where does the data get turned into a narrative? Where do I make narrative choices about geographic data? Where should I distinguish between maybe that jump I make from my local region to the nation thing? And what you'll do this week is you'll do a shared mapping project together where you'll each pick a location in New Jersey, maybe even on campus, that you value, that you care about, that you want to share with others.